Hi there. So in this video, we're going to be exploring together a really powerful framework for any change maker, which is the four quadrants of change. Now, what this is actually a framework that was created by Ken Welbert, who is an American theorist and writer of transpersonal psychology. And what he created was this very simple framework that anybody can be using in order to consider all the key elements that can impact and fuel or tinder the change that you're trying to drive. So the way that it's structured is that it's split into four quadrants. The top quadrants are based on the individual, right? So see it as the leaders that are driving change, right? And what is their internal subjective states, right? So their mindset, which is their values, their belief systems, their purpose that drive them to do what they do, their emotions or thoughts that they have. And then the externalized and objective states, which are the behaviors that they exhibit, right? So these are the habits that they have, the way that they communicate with people, and also their capabilities, their capacity, their skills. Then on the bottom two quadrants are actually taking into consideration the collective. So it's what is our culture, right? And when you're driving change, you're thinking, is our culture fostering the change that we want to drive, or does it have to be adapted? And these are the shared values, the shared belief systems and purpose that the collective of our organization has. And finally, the one that's more obvious to us, and actually it's the one that people, change makers seem to focus on the most and kind of neglect the other ones, is the system. It's the processes and the structures and the metrics that we need to put in place in order to drive that change. Now, let's dig a little bit deeper into the top quadrants, which is the mindset and the behaviors. And I like to present them together because they're so intertwined, right? So when you're trying to drive the change, you're not driving it by yourself, right? You're driving it with a leadership team, and you need to focus on or reflect on, are the leaders who are driving this change, do they have the mindset that's needed in order to fuel this change? Is it aligned, or do we have to make work on ourselves? Now, just taking a step back, every single individual tends to operate with the reactive mind. What does that mean? That means there's a solicitation from life events and we automatically react. Now, that process, let's dig a little bit deeper, right, is our mindset drives our actions, right? Our mindset is actually how we fundamentally look at life. It's the assumptions that we have about reality. The way I look about, consider life is very different to maybe you, right? And we need to understand as leaders that our perceptions, our perspectives of reality are actually assumptions. They're subjective. And a lot of people don't think about that, right? And what happens is based on our mindset, it triggers certain internal states. So it will trigger a line of thought. It will trigger emotions within us. It will have also physical impact on ourselves, and it will generate or deplete our energy. And all this will lead to an externalization, which we can call our behaviors, right? Which are the habits that we have when certain life events take place. How do we communicate, or what are our capabilities? And so that if we're not aware of this process of our mindset is leading our internal states and then driving our behaviors are quite automatic. So what we want to do with our leaders is make sure that we're developing self-mastery, right? Because they are the most important strategy, method, and tool in order to drive the change. And in order to gain self-mastery, we need to create a bigger gap between the solicitation of our life events and the automatic reaction. What does that mean? That gap is actually understanding what's going on, right? Understanding that this is our subjective perspective, and that we can expand that perspective, right? To see the other person's perspective in this situation. And it gives us a choice where we can say, what is the situation I want? How do I want to behave in order to drive the situation that I want? And this will lead us to, instead of reacting to solicitations, it's actually interacting with life and actually modeling desired behaviors in order to drive the desired outcome that we want. And this is so important for leaders to have, because they have influence over other people. And so if they don't model behaviors, then obviously they're not facilitating others to exhibit the behaviors that will facilitate your change. So why is self-mastery so important, right? It helps us improve our performance because we identify the assumptions that we have, right? And it helps us also to shift. So if it's inevitable that through change, we're going to be facing challenges. And if we're not able to shift and move ourselves into a higher level of ourselves, and we're more in a reactive mind, we're not going to be able to perform at our best, right? So it's so important to have this self-mastery. It also helps us generate greater impact because, as I mentioned, we're modeling positive behaviors that others can also adopt in order to facilitate that change. And finally, it helps us to solve more complex challenges. Why? Because when we're dealing with trying to solve a problem, we're able to see that problem from various perspectives, not just our own subjective perspective, but understanding that others can see it in different ways. And so that actually generates new insights. And so we can incorporate those in our solutions that we come up with. So that moves us to the next quadrant, which is on the bottom, which is the collective, right? And its culture. Now, I'm not going to go deep into this because there's a whole world in terms of designing an efficient culture. But what I want in this, let's say, short video is for you to have in mind is that when you are designing your process, your strategy for change, culture is so important, right? Because you need to consider, is the culture that we currently have, is it aligned with the change that we're trying to, the vision of where we want to go, the change that we want to drive? And if it's not, we need to start working towards changing that culture, modifying it so that it fosters the change. So maybe it's different values that we need to have, shared values that we need to have, or it needs to be belief systems. So in the past, I used to work in innovation, and one of the biggest challenges was the fact that people didn't believe that they could make the change, right? So they had this belief system that it was too much effort, and so it's better to stay as we are. But we needed to work with them to see the benefits of, we need to have a bigger vision of where we want to go. Our purpose needs to change. And so we need to get excited about how we're going to achieve that. Now, then the final one, which is the systems that we put in place. And we need to build systems that incorporate all the other quadrants that we talked about, right? But also we need to build systems that get full alignment. What does that mean? Imagine you build a system that no one actually buys into, right? So you can build the most amazing system, but it's not incorporating the needs of your stakeholders, and so they are not getting buy-in. Now, the ultimate design that you want to get is actually a system whereby you get full alignment. What does that mean? Is that people are actually not only buying in, which means they're aligning in words, but they're actually also taking actions in order to help you embed and implement that system, that process that can fuel the change that you want to drive in the world. So how do you actually build this system that actually gets full alignment? Well, the number one thing is actually getting stakeholders involved from the beginning, right? You need to make sure that you understand not only the stakeholders that are going to be key in implementing your solution, your process, your change, but also the ones that are going to get influenced by it, right? Because you want to have this unification. You want everyone to be moving towards the right direction, the same direction, and actually participating in moving the ship forward. So you need to understand what are their needs, what are their hesitations, in order to incorporate that into when you're designing your action plan, so that you can slowly alleviate those elements of resistance from them. And finally, you need to choose the right motivation methods for them, right? So you can have a system in place and then use the stick motivation method. I've made those mistakes myself in the past, but it's very temporary, right? You're going to get compliance, which means, okay, everyone's nodding around the table, but are they actually taking actions? Are they actually embracing the change? Are they helping you move that forward? No, they're not. Ultimately, you're going to see the ship actually moving very, very slowly, and ultimately everything will diffuse in the end. You can also use the reward system, the carrot. Unfortunately, though, with rewards, we know that they're very short-lived, right? So you might get a buy-in from people that this is a great idea and I'm going to get rewarded. But the moment that they get rewarded, that reward, you need to constantly continue to give rewards, and then it loses its novelty. And so slowly people will fade out and start to move backwards and not facilitate the change. And of course, change does take time. So you're going to have to create a reward system that lasts quite long. And also, if you have a reward that is way in the future, what happens is that we discount, time actually discounts the value, that how we perceive that reward. So if it's too much in the future, people will slowly as time goes by, will start getting demotivated, and you'll see things kind of diffused. So the best way to do it is actually through choice. It's really, like I said, understanding your stakeholders' desires, their passions, understanding, what intrinsically motivates them, and incorporating that into the system that you design. Because that's the only way that you're going to get full alignment, where they can actually stand for the change that you're trying to drive, and they're actually happy to participate in deploying the systems that you're trying to put in place. So I hope with this small introduction to the quadrants, I think you can take a few learnings and be able to ask yourself, what are the various elements that you need to take into consideration when you're driving your change. And hopefully through this framework, you can unlock your own collective potential. Now, if you're driving change and you really want to take your change strategy to the next level and make sure that you're designing the best strategy that can get everybody fully aligned and incorporating all the 4 quadrants that we discussed, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll be more than happy to explore this with you in more depth.